So yeah, any questions, guys? Anybody want to start it off? Anybody? Come on, there are questions. Don't tell me that. Come on. Look at these pieces. Yes. Ah, there you go. Would you mind actually standing up and coming up here? That would be great. Take a walk. Start this one.
My question is, does it have to pertain to the movie itself? No.
Well, I mean, the idea talks about a lot of stuff. So just in general,
I know.
yeah.
Most of the stuff that I read in this movie, I pretty much already knew. The good thing about it is it does condense it in a nice little package, which is very good because most of the information that this movie does provide is scattered across the internet and other books and other stuff like that. But the thing is that I noticed that it doesn't, like, it talks about the main points, but it doesn't seem to talk about the fact that how we should all get together and actually do it. It gives a good idea of the actual, like how to build a society, the resources, just to, strategically, all that stuff about the resources and stuff like that.
So the transition, how do we get from here to there?
Exactly. Well, not mainly the transition, but like how would we get everybody else to see it as the way it is instead of what other people view it as such? Like the false tags and names that they throw on it, like the whole point when he said, "Oh, you must be a Marxist," or if you're not against, if you're against the principles of this country, you're considered a terrorist.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Well, yeah, so usually that's a question about the transition. So, okay, so this is a great goal, but how do we get there, right? That's what everybody's always asking.
No, it's more like how do we get everybody else to understand?
Well, I think it's the same thing,
How do we get the people we need for the transition?
Yeah, exactly. That's the same thing, because for us to get to this point, people need to be aware of this stuff, right? People need to sort of understand it. And I think I think the first thing, when someone asks that question, first thing they should do is they should look at themselves. First thing they should do. So when they say, "Oh, how are we going to get here?" First thing you should do is look at yourselves. And obviously you are the answer in the sense that you have to start getting motivated. You have to start organizing. You have to start getting together with other people. And I think that's the first thing that people have to understand. Because usually when people ask that question, they're always looking outside. They're looking at other people. So, but you have to look inside first. So that's the first thing I would say. And then secondly, what I would say is that you always have to start somewhere, and that's why we have the Zeitgeist movement, whatever, which is a global movement and chapters all around the world. But beyond that, I think that it's all about organizing, and it's all about doing things such as like this, as we're doing now. And I think it's all about awareness. We have to continue communicating with other people, pushing these ideas out there, having discussions like this, revising if we need to revise. It's not necessarily a perfect. So we're not going to have a perfect answer to that, but what we do know is that
There never will be.
There never will be, exactly. But what we do know is that not doing anything we know is not the answer. So we know we just have to continue organizing. I mean, I think that's what I would say is the main thing: organizing and awareness. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, I think we could get more people. Well, in order to get more people, we all have to. We all have to be able to talk about the information readily. There's lots of lectures and things. Now, you can just watch the movie a couple more times, or and there's and you need to train yourself to answer common objections like, is this communism, or how is it different than communism, and or isn't this against human nature, and as well as being able to explain the way the system works, and practice bringing it up in conversations that you have with your friends and your family, when you talk about some news story about this or that is going wrong, and how to relate that to not just the direct problem, but to how that problem is rooted in a bigger problem that is in the psychology of this whole system, what makes it run. That's what creates those problems, and you need to train yourself to bring that up in conversations with your friends and family?
The only thing I'll say is that I think it's already happened. The revolution. I mean, anyone who's aware of what's going on at Occupy Wall Street and all the protests that have been going on around the world, they're all indicative of people being frustrated with the system that we live in. So I think it's already happening. And this movie came out in January 2011.
Yeah, this past January.
Just past January 2011, long before any protests happened, anything showing what a revolution could be happened. So in a way, it's sort of predictive of what we could begin to see. So that's all I'll say.
Another thing is I want to know how does this group or organization deal with others that may not be 100% in line with the Zeitgeist, but do follow along the same paths?
That is a great question. That is a good question. I think that the thing about this movement is that it's global, right? So we have all these different people. Obviously, we're aligned with the ideas, but not necessarily with approach of how to just deal with other organizations. And I think that there are some of us in the movement who are a little bit shy about sort of partnering up with other organizations. But then there are other of us who are not so much, Like for example, our chapter, I would like to think that a lot of us in our chapter, we feel that partnering up with other organizations is essential to creating something like this in the future, Because to think about it, if an organization disagrees with you on certain things and they might not really understand some of these ideas, the only way that they might get to the point where they do understand it is by being with them. It's by doing events together. It's by talking. It's by discussing.
Mutual exchange of ideas.
Exactly. So I personally, and I think a lot of others in our chapter, feel like we do want to partner up. And actually that's been a point of discussion within our chapter a lot. And we're actually going to focus a lot of our energy on that, partnering up with organizations.
Yeah, I think we do want to partner up with other groups, but we don't want to get bogged down in dealing with specific things like let's pass a law that makes this better. Let's increase minimum wage. Let's pass a law saying that corporations can only contribute a certain amount of money to politicians, or let's donate money for renewable energy infrastructure over here. We don't want to get bogged down in those specific things. We want to partner up with organizations that want to change the way our world works. Even if they don't agree with a resource-based economy, even if they think a slightly different change or a totally different change is necessary, as long as they believe in removing the current system, we'd like to partner with those groups. And if they, although want a resource-based economy, then we can build resource-based regional versions of a resource-based economy in certain areas, and they can do slightly different things in other areas, as long as we come together in a mass and say, we're not going to do this anymore. I think those are the groups that we really need to partner with.
And I'd say, if I add from one thing, what do you guys, so you say you guys are partnering, with other organizations and groups that have similar lines?
We haven't started, but we would like to.
But how far do you plan on researching into the individuals and those other companies? Because there are people that will front and pretend that they're with certain codes, but are actually not, and they're just part of the same status quo. Think of it as like moles or double agents, whatever you want to call it, like the bullshit, like the stuff that's happening in Zuccotti Park and other occupying protests, how they have these people who are paid to go there to start problems, so the whole thing looks bad.
Well, the way that you can decrease partnering up with I guess fake individuals or organizations is just by being vigilant and just and reading and communicating. I mean, there's really not one formula where you can not. I mean, the thing is that I think the idea is to be open, and in being open, you're always going to be vulnerable to organizations like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's. I personally don't have any golden rule to sort of decrease that. All I know is that you just have to be vigilant, and you have to communicate a lot, and you have to create long-lasting relationships. And also, whenever you see that they're sort of steering the ideas of the conversation into a direction that we don't agree with, then it's about trying to pinpoint that like early on, and then taking the necessary course of action, like splitting up or like not dealing with that organization. I mean that's all personally I can say about that.
It was just more along the lines of, will the research actually be done into the possible partners and stuff? That's more along, not necessarily what you would do.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely want to do some research to make sure that you're aligning yourself with people that are at least walking down the same path.
Just wanted to make sure beyond with that.
I don't think that there needs to be too much worry about, oh, should we do dealings with these people because they might put a mole in our midst, because we're already out there. We're on the internet. They can see all these films and everything we're about. So there could be a mole in this room right now, but it really doesn't matter. You know, we don't need to research every one of you and make sure you're not a mole, because what are you going to do? Or organizations that we may work, as long as they're working to remove the current socio-economic system and they're helping us in some way, shape, or form. And then if they're not helping us, then they're not helping us. I mean, and say, well, look, you're not helping us. You're taking funds and doing something else with it. You're not helping us with removing the socio-economic system. And at that point, we would stop working with them. But I don't think that a tremendous amount of energy needs to be spent to research a certain group before we tentatively partner with them, because we're already out there, you know.
I just finished saying it wasn't about, it was more about the fact that if you actually do it, not the fact of how much resources you spend. And it's not the fact that every organization is going to send one, but there is that possibility that they will send one, especially if it's going to be going against the thing that's making them live. You know, like the whole monetary system that keeping us down and keeping them up. There is a high possibility that they will send somebody to throw a monkey wrench in it. You know, because we're going to be messing up their.
We're all research junkies, like research nerds. So that's something that we do naturally, most of us. So yes, if we partner up with an organization, I personally will be doing that. And just by me knowing all the rest of the members that I know, it's something that we do with everything. So we're definitely going to be doing it with organizations that we might partner up with.
I guess I'm not understanding how this monkey wrench would work. How are they going to?
Like somebody would come here, suggest negative or put down like positive ideas towards the movement. They would say negative things on it, steer people across against it, split up groups of people against each other. That's called throwing a monkey wrench into something cohesive.
Yeah, well, that's already happening. There's people on the internet putting up their videos, you know, saying that this would never work, you know, and you know, all we need to do is counter those arguments, you know, and we've been doing that, you know, to a certain degree. Maybe we need more people to counter more of the argument, more of the time, because so many of them pop up online and whatever. But we need to be prepared to deal with counter arguments. Yeah.
Well, a mole technically doesn't show himself. A mole works and pretends to be an insider as he's part of the group, but is actually doing things detrimental towards it. So mole is something that's not, I'm a mole, you know, this is not good, I don't like the way this is happening, we should all do this. They're not going to say it like that.
But I can answer that question, because basically all you have to do is go back to any kind of movement that has happened in history. And you understand that no matter what, when you're going after somebody's money, there's going to be. The only way that movements have done in the past to handle those is to have a strong infrastructure of a basic core. And out of that basic core, that was basically how the Black Panther movement even manipulated as long as they did in this country. Because believe me, from day one, as soon as they became, they all were from jail, so they were all identified. So from day one, the government had a movement against them because they were, the number one thing the Black Panthers did in America was educate kids and feed them in the morning for school. That was their number one thing. And they did that all across this country. And that is now lacking in basically Black minority areas. Well, my question is, how will you get rid of the 7 deadly sins?
So this is the thing, the seven deadly sins. I think that the first part of this film that deals with human nature addresses that. Greed. Well, greed is one of those seven deadly sins, right? So, greed. Let's talk about greed. I think that all of us have been taught to believe that greed is something that's innate in us. This is just a part of us. We're gonna be greedy regardless of how we live in the world. That's sort of how we're taught to believe. That's what I thought most of my life. Only a couple of years ago I started doing a lot of scientific reading where I realized, oh wait a minute, no, greed is not innate. Greed is just a product of your environment. So these seven deadly sins that we believe are innate in us and will always cause us to self-destruction as humanity, these things are, from my reading, according to the research I've done, are false. If we are a product of our environment, then what we have to do is change the environment so that we don't have to be greedy, so that we don't have to be violent, and some of these other things. So I think that what we have to start doing, if that's very troublesome to you, like how we're going to surpass these things, I think it's very important for you to start reading a lot of science cases that they have been putting together now that deals with these issues about human behavior. And a lot of the results is that environment to a large extent is what triggers these things within us, these behaviors, and that's what we want to do. We want to create a great environment so that these things are decreased within us,
I have a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
On that, even though you believe that you can do those things, and I agree with you that they're a part of your environment that you live in, the number one thing of it is changing the environment. So now, how are you going to do this when that is the hardest thing in any kind of environment? And basically, what usually happens is it comes out of war, like in Libya. So how are you going to do this without having an economical fight, which is going to be physical?
Everything seems to indicate that that's exactly how it's going to happen. I mean, we wish for it to be peaceful, but everything seems to indicate.
Well, we want to change things, but we don't want to change things through violence. I think what he's saying is violence may occur as things get scarcer and scarcer, as energy gets scarcer and scarcer, but we're not looking for a violent change. We're looking to offer people a better solution. And I think, by the way, that there will always be greed on some level. I mean, greed is a result of scarcity. There's not enough stuff. Before you're going to be greedy, you're going to try and hoard it. And all we can do is lessen that. We can create more abundance of as many things as we can make abundant, and therefore decrease greed. But there's always going to be something that somebody's going to want that's not as easily accessible as it may be to someone else or in a different area or whatever. So I don't think we can eliminate greed entirely and make things absolutely perfect, but we can make things a hell of a lot better. So then why should we?
You want us to raise our hand or walk up?
Yeah, let's take.
Well, I'm going to answer that question. I think change will happen starting with the children. If you start to educate the children and feed the children, changes happen over generations. So, it's not going to happen overnight, but, if we start educating the children now and feeding them and giving them love and showing them that, this world can be different, then maybe possibly it'll eventually move into where it needs to be.
I didn't really, I had a lot, and by having a lot, sometimes you don't say anything. First I'd like to just say that they had hundreds and hundreds of years of programming these people of America and all over the world. Hundreds and hundreds of years of putting their program in place. And this is just starting. And it's, it's something called like deprogramming. I find it's slightly a deprogramming. When I first seen the first tape, it was very depressing. It was gloom, wars, destruction, starvation. And where's the light? And the light is enlightenment, waking up the people, the masses, and And that is such a hard task. Even when I speak to the kids and people I deal with every day of my organization in Staten Island, I go into so many battles of the condition of how we think, even with religion. There's no other way but Christianity, you know, and we play one against another. So with that in mind, and that's the name game, is just playing one against another. It's almost like you're reaching for a needle in a haystack. You know, where you're talking from, like where you're starting from ground zero. And I know you got to start someplace, but my God, there's some work behind this, you know, because it's all about deprogramming. More seminars, have more something like this, because I don't see another way. You know, today there was something about with the kids, you know, because I just, you know, when you talk to people, and I talk to a lot of people, I work with the court systems, and you hear the degradation, kids getting ready to take their own lives at 12 years old, ready to give up. And that is the environment. And I would like to see more of you know, and who am I, but I would like to see more of them. You say you're all around the world, but I hear a lot of information from one type of people, European perspective. If you're all around the world, why am I not seeing Africans or seeing Indians speaking, or seeing other people from different cultures speak? I don't see that on these tapes. And I see a lot of just one aspect. And since you influence, you give spot checks. You give, look, okay, this is India, this is Africa. But I don't hear an African speaking. I don't see an Indian speaking. I don't see an Oriental speaking. You know, and that's something I would like to see more. Get a different view from different people. Thank you.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna answer your second question first. This is a film that the director, Peter Joseph, directed about these ideas, right? So this film was about these ideas and the research that he did to explain these ideas. So the goal for this movie wasn't to show the movement and the different faces of the movement. So it's two different goals. Now we can now have a conversation, and I can tell you, oh, there are chapters all around the world, and I think including India, and I think one or two actually popped up in Africa as well. But that's the face of the movement. So those are two different things. But yes, they do exist, and yes, they are talking about these same very ideas because they feel like that they're aligned with these ideas. And I mean, if you personally would like to see, because we do research about all the other chapters as well, all you have to do is literally put Zeitgeist movement and then the country, and something will pop up. You know, not always, but there's just a lot of us all around the world. So that's that.
And there's a lot of why I advocate videos too. If you type in why I advocate, and you know, there's tons of people of all different races coming on, and some in different languages, and that's very interesting too. But with the film, you know, they just got, you know, the quickest expert that he could find. He wasn't concerned about whether one of those experts was of a certain race or not, because race isn't important. It's the information that's important.
I'm not even talking racism. I'm talking human beings, and that's something that, you know, I try to get away from. This is a human experience, and believe me, I'm not going to sit and say I'm colorblind. I come from a society that's not colorblind. But I do have the concept and the ideas to realize that we're all just human. I'm not talking racism. I'm talking just the way it is. It affects everybody. So show everybody.
But most of the people that you saw speak on in the movie were experts in their particular field. So it wasn't about getting a perspective of how things are going in Africa or anything. You know what I mean? I mean, that would be a great video if we could. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, maybe we should make a video like that.
What ties us all in?
Thank you for the idea. Well,
how all those issues tie in and show up a much more global perspective. So you go, okay, you know, we have people in India. We all have these core values that unite us, regardless of our differences. Cool.
I think, yeah, Jose, I think you really touched on a real key. But there are certain facts that I think that need to be pointed out, because your question really the overreaching points with some of these films, because they are really coming from the internet. In most of the African countries don't have access to the internet as well as the Caribbean. So you're seeing chapters in Latin America from different parts of the world, but as Jose just responded, I think that says volume in terms of, but it doesn't mean that that couldn't have been done. It only means that you have to have more expenses. If you have guys who are pretty much in North America, that's pretty much who they use. They use Americans and pretty much people that were in Canada. I mean, so that's what was used. But the first point, the question that you raised on the first issue, and I think is the core issue that most people seem to probably, it gets lost, which is culture. And what culture is the definition of our philosophical positions, our instincts, economic, social, and everything else. And that is very hard to take out. Changing the condition is one thing, but changing culture, which has been hardwired into people's instincts and brains, is a very long process. It is a process not only of educational aspects, but it is through going through the process of transition, which is what OWS is doing right now. You have to be involved. You cannot be on the sidelines thinking that you're going to be sort of going through this transformation sitting at home. It's not going to happen. So in other words, and I think one of the things they said this week, which I thought was, it was probably a quote from Bloomberg, and so they turned it around. Bloomberg was saying, inaction is not an option. As much as it is for Bloomberg and the likes of Bloomberg's, it's also for everybody else. Inaction is certainly not an option. And I think what has happened a lot with the Zeitgeist movement, we've become highly theoretical, and there is a lack of practice. There is a lack of understanding that you have to act. Because it is in the process of acting that you really begin to learn. So generally speaking, what happens is exactly this. You get this cultural stuff, and you're getting these things in your head, but unless you go out there and begin to immerse yourselves in this particular transformation, which is happening right now, which is the very first phase of a critical mass, and it's ballooning, and it needs people to take part all over. That's pretty much what it's happening.
Yeah, I agree with what Hans said, but this gentleman here was correct. It is difficult, and I think that if there were no pressures on our society to change, and we were just talking to people fancifully hoping that we could create a change, it could take hundreds of years just by talking to people to get our values and our cultures to change. But the collapse of our current socioeconomic system that was touched upon at the end of this film is going to really create a lot of pressure. It's going to inhibit your lives, my lives, and it's going to inhibit the lives of billions of people, and that is going to make people look for other solutions. And you see it in Occupy Wall Street, and you see people looking for something else, and that could speed it up a lot quicker than it would happen otherwise. There's a film called Collapse by Michael Rupert that goes into much more detail. Michael Rupert was one of the guys on this film, but if you look up Collapse, that's a film that goes into a lot more detail on just how imminent this collapse of our socioeconomic system is, and it is going. Make no mistake, it will create pressure that will cause this to go faster. I don't know how fast, but it's going to go faster than it would happen if we were just depending on talking to people to hopefully change our culture.
Hi everybody. Okay, so I have a pretty massive headache, so if I stop making sense, shout at me. One quick comment on Ms. Calvin's comment. I understand sort of the practical necessities that the director, must have been thinking about when he was making his film. Doesn't have a Hollywood budget, can't go across the world and talk to doctors and professors from Africa and Asia and such. But the sort of different perspectives that are sort of historical between races and nations, they might have a very different perspective on some of these things, and so. If he does make another movie, I hope he does that. Okay, so two kind of quick questions. So at the very end of the movie, we're left with an image of you know, hundreds and thousands of protesters facing cops. And I see sort of the, you know, and then then about 20 or 30 minutes before that, we had this image of sort of a green city, sort of a sort of pastoral ideal. And sort of going from one to the other isn't something that the film really, I think, picks up on, or at least I didn't really get that, in terms of, you know, like, what's going to happen to the U.S. nation state? What's the sort of redistributed, like, program of resources? You know, who's going to coordinate that? How is it going to build on the sort of, like, uneven development that already exists in this nation? Is there sort of a projected sort of geography of ecological building that's going to happen? I guess so that's one thing, and I would be interested to see with the director where we go. The second is actually also a comment on another question that the gentleman brought up, the 7 deadly sins. I think the sort of green building city that we see at the end of the film really reminds me of, I don't know how many people are familiar with Evans or Howard's Garden City plan. He was a sort of pastoral, he was reacting to the Industrial Revolution. He said that we should just build these sort of cities, these sort of garden cities out away from, you know, manufacturing centers, and as a sort of like, I know this isn't a word that you guys or anyone here likes, but sort of his sort of utopian idea was a society run basically not on exploitation, but on like communal labor. And when I see these, I'm sort of reminded see sort of like 21st century versions of that, and I think it's really awesome. I think the ideas that power these cities, that they can basically be almost self-sustaining, is really an incredible prospect. But what it does potentially is there might be a sort of tyrannical element to it. I take for a second to explain, but I think there's a tyrannical element that's maybe present in every utopian plan. It is in the end one person's vision, and so while I may disagree with the former person who held the microphone, well, what I mean to say is that it doesn't exactly like it doesn't. I don't know how much it allows for plurality, because his version of the seven, and in perhaps his version of the 7 deadly sins, you know, all of those things are bad, but you know, I see, you know, I enjoy a lust for knowledge. I may have very different ideas. You know, how do me and him interact in a society that may be in some ways very stratified? And you know, I would just, I'm not saying it's impossible. I would just like to know more. So.
Sure. I hear the argument. I've heard the argument before that this could turn into a tyrannical system because it's global. That the whole world is managed. You know, they want to manage the resource, so they see that as power consolidation in some way. But what you have to realize is it's based on science, and it's based on rotating the resources. And I think that when we write the actual programs that manage these systems, that if we have the kind of mechanization that never existed before when they tried to do communism or whatever, if we have this mechanization that frees people up, there could be millions and hundreds of millions of people on the internet looking at what's being done, what's being programmed, how the algorithms that manage the resources work, and in fact, many of them could learn computer programming if they want and help to program it. You know, kind of like these open source things like Linux and Wikipedia that they're done by lots of people collaboratively in an open source way, all contributing pieces. You know, and they're all looking at it as it's coming together, and so it's not one person's vision, it's not one person's program that's going to manage the resources for everybody. It's just going to be collective effort and a scientific approach to the most sustainable and efficient management and rotation of all the things that people need physically and socially and psychologically.
I think to be clear of your question, I think what he's saying is that this vision of a resource-based economy is just one version, and you're saying that implementing that one version itself could be interpreted as tyrannical as compared to other versions that people might want. Is that your question?
I guess I'm a little bit ambiguous in my own question. That sounds right. But just to sort of respond to that, and maybe help clarify what the question actually is. Sorry, folks. You know, the idea of a resource-based city, resource-based economy, what it seems to do, and I think it's really awesome, is that it sort of frees the people who live there from like exploitive labor, exploitive meaningless labor that's ecologically destructive. What about, does it necessarily mean there won't be a class system? What about racial antagonisms? What about gender antagonisms? You know, those other sorts of kinds of domination that won't necessarily be fixed in by this new sort of spatial fix that this new sort of utopian idea is.
Well, we feel that those are outgrowths of the system that we live in. So if we we feel those are outgrowths of the system that we live in. So that if you create a new system, you will no longer be generating that type of behavior.
Okay, I hear you. I guess in the end I would want to see like more detailed plans because there is
There's another film coming out.
Fair enough. Probably hogging this. So.
No.
You know, the issue I think is, again, I think you're raising a lot of issues, but generally speaking, what happens is that things don't break up, as Michael Rupert would say, they break down. So therefore, am I being here?
Yeah.
And what you've raised as an issue is people don't have all answers. If we think that processes that are being played here, there's a lot of poetic license. We don't have all the answers. People are going through a process in which the decisions that are being made in products or materials that are finite. So you're going to have to deal with, as is raised in the movie, which is reality. How do you deal with reality? How do you deal with the resources depletion? How do communities deal with these issues? Which is really what I think is very, very important, is that communities need to have much more of a base action. More and more communities get involved in sustenance, in being able to sort of get off the grid. Because whatever we're talking about, we're all status quo. We're just highly theoretical about certain issues. We are making some mental shifts. But the fundamental difference is, when do you begin to sort of take action to get off the grid and create the stuff that you've seen? And before getting to a real computer telling you, this is, those are things that are a possibility. The essence is for people to have a greater understanding of their reality and the action plan for people to survive, and then to work towards thriving. Do you see what I'm saying? So we're not going to have, it's not a linear road. No social transformation goes on a straight line. It has ups and downs, it's got back and forth, it's got variances, and one has to sort of look at these things as a process.
Cool. And I wanted to say one last thing, but you can go ahead. Yeah, Mike. Another thing is that this system, what they're proposing is, it sort of takes care of the bare minimum and then some. So this, to me, what I think is so great about this system is that it takes care of all the things that we actually need physically. It's not even and mentally as well. Let's not even go beyond that. The fact that everybody will have food, the fact that everybody will have health care, the fact that crime will go down, all these things in and of itself, regardless if we take care of, let's say, other stuff, which I think is very important, gender equality and racism, a lot of these other stuff, which is important. But I feel like this model is sort of the foundation of our society. And if you take care of the foundation, it allows for everything else to get a lot better, a lot faster. You see that? So this is just the foundation. This is just the bottom, you know? Like, instead of me, like, I think just the conversation about, hey, should everybody eat or not? I mean, like, to me, that's so general and that's so basic. And as long as we take care of those basic things first, which we're not doing, then we can go on and talk about some other stuff, you know? So this is why I think this is so great, because it just takes care of the foundation first. Then everything else, you know, will slowly develop as well.
On that note, I like coming and watching the movies with you guys, because there's always some ideas that bat around that keep making things evolve in my head, and I think in everybody else's. But the first point I want to make is that only one woman came up here and was the only one that mentioned education. And I started thinking, two things, and then you mentioned healthcare, which is another one. two things that cannot be mechanized, cannot be automatized, are education and procreation. No robot is going to create humans. No robot is going to educate humans. The robot can maybe help with math and this and that, but in the end, the education will also come from, giving love to the to infants. Starting with one of the first things that blew my mind when I watched this movie is, babies in life-assisting situations that were born premature, or even the fact that if we're not touched, we will die. I was not aware of that, and I have even some regrets of some way I raised some of my kids going back 20 years ago. But I've always thought that two categories of people should be privileged in society, if anything, and would be a transition. And they are pregnant women and teachers. I was a teacher a long time ago, and I realized that more than 20 hours of class time actually, and my teaching started to degrade. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't even think of better ideas how to give a better class next week, next month, next year. And I remember at one point I did have that enthusiasm, says, oh, I thought of a better way of teaching this. And it was just English. It was not, anything life-shattering or earth-shattering. But a teacher who, and there's plenty of them, there's millions of them in the world, that are really enthusiastic about their profession, love their profession. If they teach for too long, too many hours a week, they cannot do a good job. The same way a pregnant woman to begin with, if she doesn't have the basics of life, she starts being, worried, and as we see in the movie, starts transmitting that to the baby right in the uterus. Okay, so that child is already going to start being born compromised. And then again, the first 2 years, I think, and I keep thinking, one of the questions that everybody says, what's the transition going to be like? Whatever you do, you're going to start giving these two categories of people, okay? A woman who is pregnant, the best treatment in the world. First of all, she shouldn't be worried about employment for at least 2 or 3 years. Okay? And that baby and her should have the best of everything, or at least not be deprived of the basics for the first 2 or 3 years of their lives. And teachers who are teaching those kids, from 1, 2, 3 to 10 to 15 to 20 years, not to get into college and everything, but at least in the early stages of life. Because an idea whose time has come is unbeatable. You just can't defeat that. For years, men have put down women for a long time, and they used to say that women should have no social roles in society. Some religions still do. Orthodox religions still say, women are born to basically procreate and create other men so they can, worship God. And that's all they should do. They should be home, creating, raising kids and procreate. Of course, most of us know, thank God, that this is an antiquated idea that will not survive. But in some societies, as we know, that still continues. So women have to have a role in society, a social role in society. But above all, a role that men cannot substitute is the role of procreating, but also giving those infant children, and the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, the wherewithal to feel happy. And once we create happy citizens, can you imagine if like 10% or 20% of the world's population start feeling really happy from an early age? They will be better thinkers. They wouldn't be as confused as we are here today trying to come up with solutions. I think solutions will come up naturally. Okay? So these are the two categories of people that should be privileged. And I mean really privileged. Society should say, oh, you're a teacher. Okay, do you have everything you need to do your job? Are you teaching more than 20 hours, even 15 hours a week? Oh, I'm sorry. No, we got to give you. You need to live someplace. You need to have everything you need, so that if you're a rested teacher, you'll be a better teacher. So that means you'll be creating better citizens. And of course, a rested woman, a happy woman who is pregnant and who then has a learning child that hopefully is also not raised only by her, by all of society, okay, will be happier, raising happier children, which in turn will turn this into 10, 15, easily 25. Generations used to be rated as 25 years old.
Let's respond to that.
So these are, to me, that's the transition. That's how you start.
Okay, so yes, yeah, not everything can be mechanized. And we're not saying that everything can be mechanized. Teachers can't really. There are computers and programs that can help. You can record a lecture that you give people, and you can replay it all over the world. So it can help. It can reduce the amount of work that people do, and it can also reduce the amount of work that people do to educate, because people won't be wrapped up doing other things. The thing is, everything that can be automated, we should automate. And then all the other things like teaching and whatever else that cannot be automated, there will be more people to share those tasks, so that you don't have to work long hours teaching, and then you'll be able to do a better job with the little bit of teaching that you do, or you'll be able to put forth your best effort in those that smaller amount of hours that you put forth in educating. Okay.
Well, it's interesting that you said that those two things should be the first two things that we should focus on, right? And the thing is that you can't focus on those two things without focusing on everything else. There is no focusing on those two things. It's either we change the system that allows for these things to be different, or we don't. So there's no just focus. Me personally, there's no focusing on those two things. This system doesn't allow for us to focus on those two things, amongst other stuff. So there is no focus on those two things, from what I'm concerned. For me, what I want to focus on is not those two things, is I want to focus on the system that allows us not to focus on those things, So I think that those two things are important, amongst other stuff as well. But I think Occupy Wall Street also, when you go out there, you see all these signs and you see all these people who have all these different issues that they care about. That's what they have on their sign. I care about this issue, education for students, immigration, all these different issues. And what they don't understand is that all those issues that they want to see change are a product of the same very one system that causes all these problems. So what I think is that what we have to stop doing is stop focusing on these subgroups of side effects of the system. We have to just go straight to the system, this monetary system. We have to, if everybody just goes straight there, we will be one powerful force. As opposed to saying, oh, we want education, or oh, we want this. Yeah, we know we want all that, but to get all that, we need to get at the heart of the problem, which is the economic system. So that's the way that I sort of view or perceive these issues.
Renato, just to add one quick thing, Macedonia has ordered 250,000 workstations for schools to lessen the burden of students and teachers right now. Right. So they have classes in the morning and classes at night, or classes in the afternoon. So therefore, it will lessen the burden on teachers by using workstations. So there are certain things that they'll be able to learn. And just to give you an idea, just to reduce it, this is what's happening right now in Macedonia.
Well, I like what you said, because to me, one thing leads to another, okay? If I'm saying pregnant women should be privileged as opposed to everybody else in society, because they're bringing a new human being to work, and that human being should be taken care of, and all of them should be taken care of, but especially at an early age. Some of us are already done damage to life, okay? And there's a lot more work in trying to change an adult who's got whatever problems they have, than in shaping one that is being born. So one thing will lead to another. For you to make like I said, a pregnant woman, even though if you think of the divided issues, I understand what you're saying. Let's attack the whole global thing, but will it happen right away? And I think by creating happier people, by having.
But how do you do that within the system? Is what I'm saying.
Well, that's the point. You will get to a point that says, okay, how is it that a pregnant woman would not have to worry about getting back to a job? Because a worried woman taking care of a 1 month or a 6-month-old or a 2-year-old baby is still transmitting that to the child and transmitting that to an environment and so on and so forth. So we know that we have to change society. So one thing is going to lead to another. We're going to have to make sure that person's get, and all of us, by extension, will need the basic necessities of life. But also, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that the division that some people foment. If you do have education, which, as I said, cannot be mechanized, and at least not to a full extent. To a certain extent, yes, certain things can be taught, but by videos, by whatever, the computer, and interactive, programs that are still to be created. But one thing is that whoever is trying to teach to whatever child that you're different or you're less than anybody else because of your gender or because of you yellow, red, green, white, black, or whatever. Everybody else is going to say, who gave you that idea? We're not born equal. I don't have musical talents, I don't have other artistic talents, but I know that I have other talents that some of these people don't. So we're born with different capabilities, but we should have equality of opportunity. We should have equality of opportunity. So, and that's the bottom line. So one thing will lead to another. In order to give teachers the ability, instead of what we're doing, and unions are negotiating things now that, okay, in order to keep your salaries, at least in New York City, you have to teach more. So now the school day is getting larger and larger, and we're not getting, smarter people out of that, by the way. The students that are coming out of our public schools are not getting any smarter because they're 1 hour or 2 hours longer. In some societies, they study for 4 or 5 hours. By 1 p.m. or so, they're out of school. Here we're out of school by 3 p.m. or something, and we're not making people any smarter. All the tests show that they're not doing any better than kids in other industrialized nations. And this is like a race to compete with other people, which is not making us any happier, just more competitive. But again, one thing will lead to another. In order for those women not to worry about bringing up their kids and having enough food and everything else, and for the teacher not being able, to have a job, first of all, that allows him to only teach 15 or 20 hours a week so he can be more creative and can do a better job teaching next week, next month, and so on.
Yeah.
You have to have a society that's going to have to change fundamentally in so many ways that, that's why I'm not saying push only for that, but pushing for that along with other things will make everything else change. Because we will continue talking and thinking. That's why I like this. So.
Yeah. So yes, we need to allocate resources the most efficient way we can so that we can meet the needs of those people. And I understand it's particularly important that we meet the needs of children, because they're more impressionable and what they have at an early age will have more of an impact than something you give to an older person. And also the women who give birth to those children are also for the same reason that's very important. And the teachers who teach those children also very important. But I don't think that we should give preferential advantage to those people. It's simply a matter of, can we provide those people with everything we need? And there is, with the current human population, there is enough if we properly manage everything to provide those people with everything they need, and also provide others with everything they need. Because if you give preferential advantage to a certain group of people over another, then you're automatically creating conflict. You're into the people who are not given this preferential treatment. You're creating some kind of potential resentment there, or some kind of psychological thing there that is going to manifest in negative things, whether you intend it or not. So I think we have enough to provide for everybody, including children and pregnant women and educators and everybody else. And I don't think there needs to be a distinction made, because there's plenty.
Well, we'll take the next question, but you're saying that first. You're saying, let's do that first before we even get to a resource-based economy is what you're saying. But, next question.
Hi. My question would be, what can we do right now to, show the government, whoever is that evil person, whatever we want to call them, that has the grip, that's making all of this the way that it is today, how can we show them that we have the power? What can we do? I don't know, I have my idea. My idea was for this Christmas, you know how everybody always goes out and buys presents? Because that's culture, you have to buy a present. How about we not buy presents? What if we just enjoy spending time with our family and just enjoy Christmas music and good food and enjoy that moment? And we don't feel the need obligation to give them a materialistic thing. Maybe that's a way that we can change. And if we all did that, a big majority of us didn't buy presents this year, then I think that the corporations' profits would decrease. And that's a way that we could show them that the 99% us have so much power over that 1%. Just by not buying Christmas presents this year and by just enjoying the sharing of giving and loving each other, not just materialistic stuff. What do you think about that?
Just quick response,
Yes.
But come up here, man.
No, just go.
But we need to record it.
No, I'm just giving a quick
Camera's
response.
getting-
There is a movement out there without viewers that's getting involved. That's the real thing. That's getting involved.
Right, so what I was gonna say is, what you're saying makes actually perfect sense. That's just an act of civil disobedience. It's like when Peter Joseph mentions that if half the country decided not to pay their taxes, you're not gonna put half the country in jail.
Yeah.
So things like that actually make perfect sense, and we should plan to do all manner of things that will put a dent in the system, because the idea is to stop the cyclical consumption that keeps the system going. If you do that, then you're not generating income, and then you're put in a situation where there has to be a change.
But let's go even a little bit deeper. How do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where enough people don't buy, let's say, presents for Christmas so that it creates a decrease in their profits? How do we even get there? It goes back to organizing. You know, if we stay at home and we saw this great movie, or we spoke to a lot of cool people, but we go home and we keep on doing the same things over and over, nothing's gonna change. However, if you start organizing and you start going to meetings with whatever organization or with whatever group of people you're with, and start creating events like this, start creating general strikes like Occupy Wall Street is doing right now. They're doing general strikes, and they're doing it in tandem with all the other occupations all around the nation, and they are slowly getting to that point where they're going to create critical mass, where one person is going to say, hey, we're going to do this tomorrow, and then everybody does it, and then loud, and we really hit. But we have to continue organizing. We have to continue staying in contact with people. We cannot like Hans said, inaction is just not an option. You know, we have to start acting.
And I had an idea actually maybe a couple months ago, and I'm sure someone has had this idea at some point, since it's not exactly radical. But I was thinking maybe we can start an organization where people just do stuff for free for each other. So let's say you're good with computers and you need a bicycle, and I have a bicycle that I don't use, but I need my computer fixed. And without necessarily that profit motive, I'd give you my bicycle since I'm not using it, and you'd fix my computer. That's another way that you could put it. So if you have enough people involved doing that type of thing, where you're knowledgeable in a particular area, you have something someone needs that you're not using, and you're willing to give it up, you can put again a dent in the system on top of all the other acts of civil disobedience that we would like to engage in.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else?
That was last question, right?
You had?
You want a quick response to her?
Yeah, here's a question. Oh, you want to do a quick response?
No, just there's been a divestment where people are taking money out of banks and putting them into credit unions, and that's been a huge search for over $191 billion on being moved away. So that's a huge action.
I think that's why they cleaned up the occupations.
Huh?
I think that's why they cleaned out the occupation. I think it has something to do with that.
Well, yeah, but it's already moving, and they'll hit it again. But they're getting more people, and they'll do it again. That's the real thing.
Hey, I'm an organizer and an activist and occupier and so forth. I'm completely objective about the movie because I got here too late and I didn't see it. So I just feel like I'm not biased at all about it. In fact, I should say, oh, look at that. Occupying my computer. But I do have some thoughts about the current moment. I do a lot of reading, sort of a news junkie. At this point, the ruling class is saying, well, I can get a worker for $2 an hour in Vietnam. You Americans, you want health care, benefits, pensions, retirement, forget you. And you Americans, you're broke. We cleaned you out, motherfuckers. So we're never going to fix your escalator in Times Square. We're going to cut back your schools. You can't afford school books in New York City. We're laying off teachers, policemen, and firemen all across this country because you're done. You're over. In fact, we're going to insist on the model that we took down Chile with here in America. It's the Chilean model. Lots of money for right-wing media, lots of racial division, lots of attacks on the power structure that exists so you can overthrow the government. Well, they brought that IMF model home, structural readjustment. The whole goddamn planet right now is being run by a handful of banks. And they don't give a goddamn if you live or die. And every single issue you can name is tied to the profit motive. The planet is being run as a large profit-producing thing. You're just nothing. You can work and work and work. So if you don't want $2 a day, like in Vietnam, you're not competitive. And they own your government, and they own your Supreme Court, and they own your president. So we're kind of alone here, but we're not. They just don't have enough prison cells for us all. And they are going to realize that as we go forward. First they tried a little bit of violence, and spray them. That didn't work. One of those girls they were telling sprayed was deaf. And that bit them in the ass and grew the movement. It was not even on the mainstream until then. Then they thought, well, let's trick him into a mass arrest. That'll keep him at home. That'll scare him, 700 people. They got out of jail and went right back to Occupy. So that didn't work. They're continuing to up the stakes with more and more violence because that's all they've got. If I may be optimistic, I would say, all right, 3 weeks from now, 40 million Americans are going to sit down in every town square in this country and stop this country. Every little town, they're going to say, no, we're not moving. 3 days after that, the ruling class's back is broken. And they're on their knees, and they're begging us, okay, what do you want? How do we get you to go home? And then you get on your list. I've got my favorite 5. One would be the guys on Wall Street go to prison. One would be money out of politics. One would be the wars are over. One would be instant free healthcare for everybody. That's 4, right? I get one more?
Free education.
Well, it'd be nice to get rid of all the student loans, have free education, but these things are all easily affordable. The one socialist in our government, Bernie Sanders, attached a provision at the end of the bailout, proposal. All right, you fuckers, you got to tell us how much. And we learned about 4 weeks ago that the bailouts globally were $16 trillion. And it went to banks around the world. McDonald's Corporation got some of it. It's a complete collapse. We're in complete collapse. We are in the nightmare future they warned us about. We're in it. Wake up. So, yes, organize. Yes, occupy. It's all we got. And it's, all right, if you want to march, go ahead and march. Sign some petitions online. Yeah. Write your senator. Yeah, go ahead. It's too late for that. They are killing us. Our healthcare system, you got a sick kid. They put a gun to his head and say, your kid dies if you don't give us the money. 600,000 bankruptcies every year because somebody in the family gets sick and you wipe the family out. Who cares? They don't.
Let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with some of the ideas that we advocate, the Zeitgeist movement? Are you familiar at all?
Zeitgeist movement. I saw the first film and the second film.
Okay. In the second film,
one of the Zeitgeist?
This is the third one. Yes.
Third one.
Yes. And the only reason I say that is because we're totally aligned, and actually we're actually trying to even take it further. Like we actually feel like we can actually create an abundance of everything that we need, including healthcare and energy and food. And although I think that there has to be sort of smaller steps to get to that point, I think that we have to understand what's the main goal. If our main goal is to just take money out of politics, our main goal, meaning like sort of the end, if that's our main goal, then I think that's really not going deep enough of what are the problems that exist in this world. So I just want you to understand, we totally align with those things, but we want to even go further. We're saying, hey, look, if we look at things technically, not through economy, not through this economy that uses money and labor to exchange, if we just look at things technically, we start to understand that we can have enough energy, food, transport, all these things that we want, technically we can create it for everyone in the world. And actually that's what we advocate. So I just wanted to put that in before, you know what I mean? And then you can continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's enough wealth. 16 trillion was given away overnight.
Resources. That's the difference. That's where we're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, money's just useful for, it's like bartering. It's kind of the same. I mean, if I want something grown in California, well, I'm going to FedEx them something that they want up there. No, I think, this useful I believe society needs organization. I don't believe in anarchy.
No way.
I don't want the state of Ohio to decide how big their train tracks are going to be and save a little money on iron, because then the trains go off the track from any other state. And we need organization, the FAA. I don't want planes crashing. You know, we need some kind of organization, but it has to be serving the people first.
We agree.
Serving the people first. And there's an interesting example. I'll just say one more thing. Bhutan, the little country of Bhutan, a 16-year-old king became king. And he set out and said, well, I'm king now, and here's my goal. I want to maximize human happiness. They have panels discussing what makes people happy in Bhutan. And they've discovered certain basic things. They need housing, they need food, they like jobs. We have the resources in this country to do that to the whole planet. What would make people happy? We just got to wrest control from these madmen, and I guess they're insane. The Koch brothers must be mad. They're old men with billions of dollars, and they're subverting every form of democracy, destroying, you know, people's lives left and right, and taking over states.
Well, they're addicts, you know, they're addicts of all the power and control that those billions of dollars give them, you know. They'd never be able to spend it on things for themselves, you know. It's an addiction.
I guess it's an addiction, maybe. I don't know what else to call it. It's mental illness of some kind. Any of these guys, and we have to control them. We have to stop them, or they're going to kill us all. They're going to kill our planet. They're well on their way to destroying the oceans. You know.
I wish we could have this conversation after you would have seen the film. It's
Right,
just
right.
because,
I just want to comment on one of your five goals. The other one we wouldn't agree with is the whole throwing people in prison. Just because we understand now that you need to address the root causes of people's behaviors and not just throw them in prison, because that doesn't solve anything. So had you seen the film, you would understand why.
Well, although we may need to restrain them for a little while so that they don't do anything harmful to anybody else, you know. But it's not for the sake of punishment. It's for the sake of making people safe and doing what they need.
I want them in jail. I'm sorry. Goldman Sachs. This guy Paulson, not the other Paulson, the treasurer. The Paulson guy went to Goldman Sachs and said, "Look, guys, I've got a bunch of garbage mortgages here. Well, they're worth." No. Okay. So this guy goes to Goldman. This is before the big crash.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna just stop. Is there any more questions? Just because we're here for Q&A specific. I'm sorry.
I mean, get it out. I feel so good.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I just wanted to know if there's any more other questions, and then we can continue talking, or any more questions, guys, about the film? Anything else?
I got one question.
Go ahead.
One question. I just like that what divides us is culture. Right. You know, I'm Chinese, I'm black, I'm this. That divides us. And religion. Most of our wars is based on I'm right, you wrong. I like that this is going into science.
Right.
And science means until you prove this is wrong, we can change it. Religion is and culture have separated this country more than anything else. Right. And I like that this film actually pushes religion out the back door. Thank you.